Good afternoon, MPC. Let's now have Assistant Secretary Tony Dambino.
Salamat, Yusek Rocky. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat at welcome sa ating Economic Press Briefing, isang joint briefing ng Economic Development Cluster at ng PCOO. Sa araw na ito, pag-uusapan po natin ang isang napakagandang balita, ang credit rating upgrade na iginawad kamakailan lang ng Standard & Poor's o S&P sa ating bansa. Ang BBB plus na investment grade rating na ating natanggap noong ika-30 ng Abril ang pinakamataas na rating na natanggap ng Pilipinas. Upang ipaliwanag kung paano natin nakuha ito at kung ano po ang halaga nito para sa atin, narito po si Secretary of Finance Carlos G. Dominguez, Treasurer of the Philippines Rosalia V. De Leon, at ang Deputy Governor po ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, si Diwa C. Ginigundo. Secretary Dominguez.
Thank you. Friends in the media, good morning. Good afternoon. Just last week, the Philippines received some piece of good news in the form of a credit rating upgrade. Standard & Poor's Global, one of the world's most reputable credit rating agencies, raised the Philippines credit rating from BBB to BBB plus credit rating with a stable outlook. This is the best rating the country has ever achieved. Let me explain how this credit rating upgrade will contribute to achieving and sustaining our middle-income country status. Credit ratings reflect the ability of a country to manage and pay back its debt. Standard & Poor's upgrade last week indicates that the Philippine government has further improved on its ability to pay back its long-term debt. A higher investment grade credit rating also signals to international investors that the Philippines is now a more attractive investment destination. The result is that investors will require lower rates of interest and returns for Philippine bonds and stocks, making financing cheaper for us. The private sector can also more easily and affordably tap international sources of funding when they borrow from overseas sources. The upgrade is a green light to invest more in our fast-growing economy. More foreign direct investment means more jobs, increased productivity, higher incomes for our people. Foreign direct investments will help us sustain our rapid growth and make it more inclusive. The Philippines received its first credit rating in 1993 under former President Fidel V. Ramos. The BB minus rating received back then was below investment grade, indicating that investing in the Philippines was very risky. You will also see in the chart that while credit ratings can improve as they did under the terms of former Presidents Ramos and Estrada, they can also go down as they did under former President Arroyo's term. The Philippines credit rating reached investment grade for the first time in May 2013 with a BBB minus rating. This was followed by another upgrade in May 2014 to BBB, which reflects a relatively good ability to meet our obligations. The Philippines remained in BBB for the next 5 years until a week ago when we received a BBB plus rating with a stable outlook from Standard & Poor's. This higher investment grade rating is just one step away from the sterling A rating territory. This is a definitive win for the Duterte administration. The Philippines has grown at an impressively rapid rate over the past decade, outpacing many countries, and the S&P believes that we will continue to achieve above-average growth. The S&P report validates the soundness of Duterte administration's aggressive spending program to address the infrastructure gap. This is especially important given that inadequate infrastructure is among the major deal breakers for investors and is one of the biggest constraints to achieving our goal of inclusive growth and poverty reduction. S&P also noted in its report that the tax reform program has increased our ability to fund public investments with less reliance on borrowing. When we do borrow, we prioritize official development assistance or ODA as it is cheaper and has longer terms of repayment as opposed to borrowing from private capital markets. S&P expressed confidence in the government's quick and decisive steps to tame inflation when it temporarily spiked last year. As a result of the government's swift action, the inflation rate began to decelerate in January and further slowed down to only 3% in April, which is well within our target. The current account deficit was also viewed by S&P as a positive development since it is largely investment-driven. This is due to an increase in imported machinery and equipment for use in the Build program. The International Debt Watcher, S&P, also cited our young, educated, and skilled workforce as one of the Philippines' competitive advantages. This is almost certainly why services exports continue to boost our economy. It's a virtuous cycle, and we should sustain investments in education and healthcare to make sure that we reap the maximum benefits of our competitive edge. Following the success of the Train Law in lowering personal income taxes and bolstering revenues, the passage of the Trabajo Bill and other tax reform package will complete the process of making our tax system fairer, simpler, and more efficient. To further strengthen the economy and increase institutional effectiveness, S&P also noted the importance of ensuring the timely approval of subsequent budgets. Moreover, increased participation in the capital markets, which the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Bureau of Treasury have made a priority, is seen as a very positive signal. Generally, S&P is telling us that we need to continue strengthening governance, policy, and reform measures. The upgrade puts the Philippines above countries like Italy and Portugal, and just a notch below countries like Spain and Malaysia. Italy and Portugal rank below us because of their heavy debt burdens relative to the size of their economies and weak external financial positions. It is important to note that the institutional investors already considered us single A rated, and are willing to accept lower interest rates to invest in our products. They believe we can do it, and we must show them that indeed we can. The credit rating upgrade is a direct result of President's choosing to invest his political capital wisely in difficult but game-changing reforms such as the Train Law and the Rice Tarification Act. Even when critics were noisy, President Duterte chose to throw his full support behind meaningful reform because it would benefit the Filipino people. For this, we also recognize the efforts of the House and the Senate in passing the critical legislation, particularly legislators like former Speaker Alvarez, Congressman Fariñas, and Congressman Daxqua, as well as Senators Pimentel, Villar, and Angara. I want to emphasize that we did not pursue these reforms to get a better credit rating. This upgrade is the effect of pursuing game-changing reforms that would lead to a flourishing economy and more comfortable life for law-abiding Filipinos. President Duterte's wise investment of political capital has not only been beneficial to the country. Now the administration has more political capital with which to continue its reform agenda. Sustained high approval ratings are complemented by credible third-party affirmations of the President's decisions, such as S&P. The effect of a triple B plus rating may not be immediate, but it is very clear it is a stepping stone to our goal of achieving and sustaining upper middle income country status in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Dominguez. Deputy Governor Ginigundo.
Maraming salamat, Asek Lambino. Let me pick up from Secretary Dominguez's important point that we did not pursue critical policy and structural reforms to improve our credit ratings. Rather, this latest upgrade to triple B plus is an outcome of pursuing what he called game-changing reforms with the biggest multiplier effects on economic growth, employment opportunities, and poverty alleviation. So what do we do with this credit upgrade, which is just one notch away from A minus? I recall in 2010 that despite the increasing number of policy and structural reforms, the credit rating agencies chose to ignore them, and using basically the same old metrics and methodologies kept us in the double B category with some stable outlook for many years. What was starkly missed out that by 2010, we had been growing positively since the first quarter of 1999. So the Philippine government and the BSP began a difficult journey of one, replicating the three methodologies used by the major credit rating agencies, two, engage them and show to them the results of their own methodologies, and three, sustain the long and increasing list of policy and structural reforms that reached a watershed under this present administration. What was the major result if one were to use the old methodologies and metrics of the credit rating agencies? Using their own methodologies, the Philippines was underrated by about 2 notches. That means at the time we should have been rated triple B minus rather than double B. When we compiled the list of legislative achievements and those still in the pipeline of both the executive and the legislative branches of government, the credit rating agencies began to notice our own little jurisdiction where indeed game-changing reforms and macroeconomic achievements were being made. Let me share another observation. The global financial crisis of 2008-2009 broke many long traditions and orthodoxies of the credit rating agencies. The U.S., long a AAA jurisdiction, was downgraded by S&P, while Greece and Cyprus, Spain and Portugal, all members of the European Union, which were investment grades ostensibly because of their membership in the developed economies economic union, were also downgraded. Many myths and legends were unmasked, including the reality that the growth prospects of many developed economies were rather soft and that financial institutions were not appropriately supervised in a consolidated way. And fortunately, the credit rating agencies began a shift in their credit rating methodologies that resulted in the upgrades of many resilient and robust emerging markets, including the Philippines. There are two keys, therefore, to an upgrade. One non-negotiable key is the sustained, focused, and persevering pursuit of policy and structural reforms. We reap what we sow. If we pursued policies that would further strengthen and increase our potential output, including infrastructure and health and education, as this government has been doing, we shall see economic growth surging with employment opportunities and poverty alleviation, as we are seeing today. Per capita income will increase, price movements will be more modest, our external payments position will be less vulnerable to external shocks, the peso will be less volatile, investments will grow, and we shall see a virtuous cycle that would emerge in favor of our economy and our people. Then the credit rating agencies will have no choice but to notice these achievements, give credit to these efforts, and further elevate our credit ratings. The second key is that, and which is very important key as well, is to remain engaged with the credit rating agencies, actual and potential investors, market players, and international financial institutions. Credit rating agencies are doing their job with respect to hundreds of other jurisdictions vying for the same upgrade. Engaging with them at every opportunity, like the ADB meetings, the IMF spring and fall meetings, ASEAN meetings, BIS meetings, business meetings in Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, London, Frankfurt, and Zurich. We should grab every opportunity to explain to them what is happening on the ground. Let us update them of the latest economic and financial indicators, results of our own stress testing exercises. In short, as in a Miss Universe contest, we must do a Catriona swirl to be noticed, to be set apart from the rest. Because indeed, like Catriona, we have something beautiful to show them. We have a beautiful narrative of how a sub-investment jurisdiction like the Philippines was able to leapfrog to an investment grade that is now just one notch away from the A category. Then the credit rating agencies, like the judges in a beauty contest, will be able to sustain their glance and give us a gaze instead. So moving forward, our goal is to sustain our policy and structural reforms because the long agenda for our people is far from complete. We have a long way to go, many more miles to travel. We don't need a crisis or an international financial institution to tell us what to do. We know what to do. We shall be doing things for the sake of our people. If these efforts start bearing fruits that are good to eat, then the upgrade will just logically be a consequence. But we also need to tell such a beautiful narrative to the credit rating agencies, our investors alike. We are therefore embarking on an agenda called the Road to A. The idea is for the Department of Finance and the BSP to organize an interagency committee that would formalize a roadmap to articulate and systematize the Philippines' active pursuit of an A-level rating. Such a roadmap will evidence the buy-in and the commitment of key economic and infrastructure officials and agencies to get our efforts properly credited to A before 2022 to help further bring about more benefits to the economy and to our people. We shall direct our efforts in addressing the issues that were raised by S&P, by Fitch, by Moody's, and other credit rating agencies like JCRA of Japan, such as further increasing our per capita income, enhancing our potential output, strengthening our external payments buffers, keeping prices stable, fortifying public finance, and elevating governance standards. These are the plots to an interesting story. We shall then convey the story to our global audience with the assistance of the Investor Relations Office of the BSP. This office was established in 2001 precisely to raise the Philippines' credit profile through collaborative, coordinated communication among agencies of the government to promote our country as a viable investment destination. Our improving credit rating is a critical element to such an investment decision. Sama-sama po tayong lahat sa lakbayang ito para sa bayan, para sa mga mamamayang Pilipino. Maraming pong salamat.
Salamat, DG Ginigundo. Treasurer of the Philippines, Lea De Leon.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Kagaya po na nasabi na ni Secretary Dominguez at ni Deputy Governor Diwa, I'm just here para illustrate lang po sa inyo yung impact po ng upgrade. So, kung medyo balikan po natin, when we issued in January our $1.5 billion bond, nakita po natin ang pricing that we got was 110 basis points over the 10-year US Treasuries. During that time, bakit 110? And if we compare it with our peers in the same neighborhood, pareho po tayong rating ng triple B lang pa tayo, so ang Indonesia then was 178 basis points over the 10-year treasuries. Colombia, ang pinepresyo po was 175, at ang Mexico na triple B plus na at that time was already even 180. So we're even cheaper than Mexico, who was then at triple B plus. So bakit nangyari to? So yung pong ating mga the market, yung mga investors po ng ating fixed income assets, na recognize na rin po nila yung very excellent economic stewardship ng ating gobyerno. And we have been producing and delivering the results. We have sustained higher growth, yung pong solid public finances, and very strong external position. And most importantly, we have consistently done the journey towards transformative policy reforms. So, kung iko-kumpara tayo, we are already in that vicinity of triple B plus at A minus. At sino po yung nasa ganong category? So Chile at that time, 99 basis points po ang pricing nila. Ang Peru, 99 bips rin. And of course, yung Kuwait, 93 bips. So if you would look between the 110 basis points at yung pong 99, so meron lang difference ng 10 basis points. So in effect, if we are now at triple B plus, that would be our interest payments savings, no? So when we look at it, just for our commercial issuances, that would run until 2022, savings of about 3 billion pesos at the list, no? Kasi we're just talking here of our commercial bond issuances. So we are also going to reap this savings coming from our own issuances in the local market because we will have sustained yung pong downward trend sa inflation. So even the cost of funding bababa. Now, pangalawa po, we are also seeing the influx of more foreign participation in the onshore market. Bakit po? Kasi yung iba pong mga foreign investors, they have very stringent investment guidelines. They will not go to an economy na hindi po bumababa sa triple B na ang rating. So with a triple B plus, we're able to throw the net far and wide to catch more fish into our pond of borrowing. So, pangatlo po, yung even the private sector, they're also going to reap the lower cost of borrowing because we all know the national government, tayo po yung tinatawag na benchmark. So if we borrow at this level, even the private sector would also be reducing their own borrowing costs. So what does it mean? Then they'll be able to have more capital expenditures to produce more jobs. And even the foreign participation, because hindi lang po ito yung mga portfolio investments that would be coming, yung nag-i-invest po sa ating fixed income and sa stocks, but more so, the more permanent investments that we would want to attract yung mga FDIs. So that means more jobs and that would create also higher employment for our people. So again, that virtuous cycle na nasabi po nila Secretary Dominguez at ni Deputy Governor Diwa. So, para po sa amin sa Treasury and to all the staff in government, this is more inspiring for us. Kasi po, all the fruits of our labor, nag-bring out na po ng results. And we are more challenged, but at the same time, more inspired to deliver more reforms and at the same time, really make it up to the coveted A rating na we are all also aspiring for. Maraming salamat po.
Yusek Rocky?
MPC, may tanong kayo? RJ? Yung microphone, please.
Ito na lang.
Oops. May microphone. Okay na.
Sir Dominguez, sir, crucial in this goal of reaching the A rating is the passage of the remaining tax reforms. But Senator Soto has said that the Senate can only commit to pass one, which is on the corporate income tax. So what would it take for this administration, especially the president, to ensure the passage of all the remaining tax reform packages instead of four?
You know, I'm sure that the Senate and the House, Senate in particular, can see the benefits of what they did. They are the ones who enabled this credit upgrading by passing the bills. And they have seen that, as Treasurer Leah said, in one issuance alone that we issued some bonds early this year, we saved 3 billion pesos already in interest interest payments. So that goes to the benefit of the Filipino people. We have another 3 billion pesos that we can spend for education, for healthcare. So there are positive benefits from this, and I hope that, with this credit rating upgrade recently, the Senate will really consider passing these bills that will redound to the benefit of the Filipino people.
But in case that scenario happens, sir, what is this government or administration prepared to do? Will it take intervention from the president again?
The president has always been intervening here. He's not disengaged. He is very engaged in this tax reform program. In fact, as I mentioned, without his investing his political capital, we would not have been able to pass this. And he has assured us that he will continue to support this tax reform program. He even said that in his speech during the campaign, that this has benefited the Filipino people. It has given us enough money to build more infrastructure, to fund healthcare, to fund more schools, to fund the free education in college. Do you know how much that costs? The free education in college? Do you?
How
3.5 billion pesos a month. That is what it costs. So, that is not going to come from heaven. That has to come from taxes and loans. So, this is how the president realizes that and is willing to invest his political capital in this effort.
All right, sir. Sir, one more question. Sir, can you talk more about what the government is doing in terms of catching up with the infrastructure spending? Because I understand that we operated on the reenacted budget in the first few months of this year. So what measures are being taken so far?
Well, with the passage of the budget, we will now accelerate the implementation so that we can catch up. But let me point out, all our plans of catching up really depends on the weather. So if we continue getting good weather, we will definitely catch up. Unfortunately, I can't predict the weather. Okay, so if the weather goes bad, then we will have problems.
But-
That's why it was very important for us, even for the next budget, to pass it on time. We missed spending 1 billion pesos a day in the first 4 months. 1 billion pesos a day that could have gone to hiring more people, to construct roads, to providing health care, to providing better education.
But have we come up with specific measures that you
Yes,
could
I
take?
told you there are
Yeah.
specific measures. The problem is there is the weather issue.
Like,
The weather issue, when it starts
no, I
raining.
mean the specific measures. Can you elaborate, sir?
Yes, the specific measures are basically with accelerating the spending. You accelerate the bidding process. You ask the DPWH and the DOTR to move their projects faster. Those are the projects, and there are, I don't know, thousands of projects that we are doing this thing on. That's why it was so important to pass the budget on time. All of this discussion about the budget really hurt the Filipino people.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Drea Colonzo.
I'm Andrea from Bloomberg. To Treasurer De Leon, following the credit rating upgrade, have we firmed up the timing of our Eurobond sale and also our Panda bond sale?
So after our Euro roadshow, and we have received overwhelming interest from the European investors, as well as from other investors from the other, like Asia and the US, we are just watching closely market developments, and very soon we may be able to launch the Euro bond issue. At the same time, for the Panda, we have already received the approvals of the regulators. We're looking closely at the RMB onshore market, and if we see favorable pricing, then definitely we will pull the trigger as well.
Ma'am, how soon is soon? How soon do you see
Very
soon?
soon. Watch for our announcement.
Ma'am, also we had plans to issue also samurai bonds and dollar bonds this year. So does the credit rating upgrade concretize or solidify our plans for this?
Definitely. But we've said we are not really, really just, we have so much focus on the upgrade, but we are just doing what we should be doing. We're focused on our work, and the upgrade is really an inspiration for us to do more, to do our best.
To Governor Diwa. Sir, you mentioned a roadmap for the A level
Yeah.
credit rating. So when do you see this being finalized? And you mentioned a lot, several issues that should be prioritized. Which to you should be top priority dito po to be able to achieve the A level rating?
Well, on the roadmap, it should be finalized by next week. Now, with respect to the issues raised by S&P, and this is related to the first question. Fiscal issues are very important. The ability of the national government to catch up with planned expenditure, that's very important. And I think the government is doing its best to be able to catch up. But that is not the only consideration in the upgrade. If you take a look, let's say at Standard & Poor's, institutional and governance effectiveness weighs 25% of the total. Economic score, and that will include GDP per capita, economic diversity and volatility, that's another 25%. External score, which means current account, our exchange rate, our reserves level, that's 16.7%. Fiscal, that includes the budget, is also worth 16.7. And finally, monetary score, another 16.7. And that has something to do with inflation management. So all of these, I think, are priorities of the national government in addressing these particular issues. Not because we wanted another A or another upgrade, but because pursuing these very important reforms on various fronts will be useful to us because we want to sustain our economic growth. We want to make sure that employment opportunities are available and to make a dent in terms of our efforts to reduce poverty in the Philippines. So they're all priorities, basically.
Okay, Salarina, peram no microphone.
To Secretary Dominguez, good afternoon po. So sir, you have mentioned about the delay in the passage of the budget. So with this upcoming election, are you expecting a friendlier Congress, especially the House of Representatives?
We are expecting that the Congress will be responsive to good ideas that will benefit the Filipino people. I cannot predict who's going to win, but we think that whoever will win has the heart for the Filipinos. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. Our tax reform, our build program, and we know that the Senate and the House will certainly be supportive.
If it's possible, can you assess the previous leadership of the House?
Well, as I mentioned in my talk, the most difficult part of the tax reform program and the start of the build was really set during the speakership of Alvarez. And as I mentioned, there were two other congressmen who were very key in assisting us there, including Rudy Fariñas and Dax Cua. Also, the Senate was very, very supportive under the leadership of Senator Pimentel, Senator Angara, and Senator Villar. But the others also helped. And I can, as I mentioned, this would not have been possible without their full support.
So under the Arroyo and the Soto leadership, could you say that there was derailment on the
No,
government?
I'm not saying there was derailment. You asked me who helped us. So they helped us. The most difficult part was helped during the first part of the administration's in the House and the Senate. The second, the Congressman Arroyo and Senator Soto also helped, but unfortunately, the time was very short. So if you want to give the credit, of course, the guys who were there longer helped us quite a lot. I'm not saying the Congressman Arroyo and Senator Soto and his team did not. They certainly helped, but the time that they were sitting is less than a year, di ba? Less than a year. So you have to give allowance for that too.
Sir, on another issue, is there a plan pa na for the government to issue this Marawi ban?
Yes. Yes.
When can we expect?
We are going to time that. The Marawi expenditures right now are financed by the GAA, right? And we have enough funds for those at the moment. When we start getting into the bigger expenditures, then we will be issuing the Marawi bonds. Right now, we had a cabinet meeting recently, and they were showing us what is being done. A lot is being done in Marawi. However, as they clear the rubble, they are finding a lot of unexploded ordnance. So you don't want to, start a big construction project without taking out all those bombs and unexploded ordnance from there. They have to be very careful. You can't send the bulldozers there kasi baka may bomba pa ron na hindi nag-explode. So they are very careful in clearing it up. But there has been a lot of work, especially in providing housing and trying to settle and water and sewage for the residents in that area already. So fortunately, we've been able to fund it from the GAA. And when we get to the real big construction projects, that's when we will be issuing the bonds.
Okay, Bernadette.
For Finance Secretary Dominguez po, sir. Sir, on election ban po, do you think the government should reconsider banning the implementation of infrastructure projects 45 days before an election, considering the negative impact that the election ban may have on the economy on the first semester po?
What are you asking? Should the election ban be lifted?
Yes.
The rules change?
Yes, yes.
Actually, the election ban does not cover ongoing projects. What it covers is new projects. And we have, you can apply for exemption from that. We did. However, we didn't have the money. We didn't have the budget. So even if the COMELEC gave us, or you can start the projects, wala pa naman yung budget. So that's where we got stuck.
Sir, on another issue po, sa trade war po, considering US President Trump's recent threat to impose tariffs on Chinese goods po, sir, what is the government doing to ease the impact of trade war po on exporters?
First of all, they have not implemented the additional duties in the U.S. I think they will do that supposedly before the end of the month, right? I'm not really sure about it. Prospective pa yun. Alam mo, we're going to get affected by that because a lot of our exports to China are our parts of, let's say, telephones or computers which are assembled in China and then re-exported to the U.S. So we are meeting with the industry to find out, how exactly they're going to be affected. It's a serious problem, okay? And we hope that the U.S. and China will come to an agreement on this issue. About a month ago, I had the chance of meeting the former chairman of the Republican National Party. And he was also the first chief of staff of President Trump. And he told me that he expected within 2 months of a month ago, so by now, that the trade issues would have been settled between them. And I'm still hoping that that will come through.
Sir, follow-up lang. You mentioned about meeting the industry stakeholders about this trade war
Yes.
po. Kailan po kaya natin ina-expect na
I,
i-meet sila?
I will talk to the DTI because they're the ones leading the charge here.
This week, sir? Kayo
DTI, the DTI.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
This week po kayo mag-uusap ng DTI,
I'm
sir?
not sure about this week, but we will certainly discuss with them. Again, contingency plans if the trade sanctions or additional tariffs in the U.S. will be implemented.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Arian?
Sir, for Secretary Dominguez, Sir Arian Maris from ABS-CBN News. Sir, after the S&P credit rating upgrade last week, do you expect upgrades from Moody's and Fitch as well?
We don't expect, but we certainly hope so.
Sir, are Moody's and Fitch reviewing the Philippines for an upgrade?
They are always reviewing us. Okay, we met with Moody's in Washington D.C. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Yeah, we met with them. And Fitch, no, we didn't meet with them 3 weeks ago, but yeah, the Fitch is coming. Our team meet with them on the average once every 3 months. So it's an ongoing process. And let me tell you, it's like having an oral exam for your master's or PhD thesis. And of course, we're glad that DIWA is always there, and our very credible national treasurer, because they certainly give a very good presentations.
Sir, you said you're hoping for an upgrade. Do you have a timeline of possible kung kailan po kaya tayo i-upgrade?
No, I don't have.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Rex, CNN?
Sec, tomorrow release ng GDP numbers for first quarter. So given the budget issue that we had, so what kind of number are you expecting?
I don't predict the GDP numbers.
But you're optimistic. How are you feeling about it?
The economy did pretty well in the first quarter. Okay, now what the exact number is, I don't know, because I'm not really sure how that drop in spending, which Leah here calculated to be about 90 billion, right?
Yeah.
For the first quarter. I don't know exactly how that will affect the GDP, but it certainly will. Now, what the number is, I can't say.
But do you think it's less than the imagined impact before?
I don't know what is the imagined impact.
Okay, thank you. Ace? Ace Romero?
Follow-up lang kay National Treasurer sa bonds. When you say very soon, gaano po kaya ka-soon? Could it be next month? Kasi nag-market na po kayo dun sa ating first investors. So, paano po? Next month? Or...
Dadagdagan ko ng isang very, very, very soon.
So, pwede kayang next month yun?
Masyadong matagal yan.
Masyadong matagal ang next month. Okay.
Within the month.
So, ano yung expect nyong reception dun sa ating Euro bonds and tsaka Panda bonds?
Yung based on the roadshow that we conducted together with Deputy Governor Diwa, yun nga, they're very receptive. They have been looking forward for the ROP to come back to the Euro market kasi the last time we did was in 2006. And lalo now, we're in the middle of our roadshow, we had the upgrade, no? And yun nga, they've been following the Philippine narrative very closely. They're aware about the tremendous strides we've had in terms of the reforms that we've done. So they see na it's about time na Philippines would also go to the market. And it's also part of our own diversification strategy kasi nga we'd like to be able to fund in so many from so many sources yung funding requirements natin, particularly for the infrastructure build-up.
So meron pong Panda, merong Euro, merong Samurai.
Yes.
Meron pa bang balak o baka enough
Hindi,
na?
at yun, as part of our funding for this year, di ba 75% onshore. So we'll be focused on the onshore market, particularly now we see inflation already declining, no? So and we're also awaiting for the policy meeting results tomorrow.
Okay, salamat po.
Okay, Celerina, then last question na tayo kay RJ. Okay.
Secretary Dominguez, follow up lang po dun sa trade war. You have mentioned that it would have serious repercussion on the Philippines if ever. So, do you have any estimate or yung i-quantify yung possible effect po?
No, I don't have that. I don't have the exact effect. But let me just put it this way. No? When you say serious, I didn't say serious. I said there will be an effect. Philippines kasi is not a big trading country. Our exports are not very large. We rely more on domestic investments to drive our GDP, as well as exports of services like our BPOs and exports of our manpower, which are not subject to these items. But there are industries that will definitely be affected. So we're just trying to evaluate, exactly how they are going to be affected. But especially the industries where there's a re-export component, we export it to China, then China puts the parts into a computer or a cell phone or what, and then it's re-exported. Those will be the ones that are affected.
So, what will be the possible action of the government to assist this sector, which could possibly affected by this trade?
We have to see exactly first who they are before we can advise them on what possible action they can take.
Okay, RJ.
Ma'am De Leon, ma'am, any update on the Marawi bonds that we intended to issue last year in November?
Secretary has mentioned na right now we're really palang funding it through our budget, no? Then but when it comes now after all the clearings being made by the task force, then we will be issuing the Marawi bonds. But in preparation for that, we've also been doing some already the features, including yung agri-agra eligibility that we have secured, so to make the bonds more attractive. In fact, there are also some structures now we are also considering to make it more attractive to retail investors.
Are we looking at the same amount as you announced in November?
So we'll have to calibrate it, ano yung requirements ng, as they are moving with the implementation.
All right. And Secretary Dominguez. Sir, how will and Governor Diwa, sir, how will the MISSI latest inflation rate, agriculture output affect the monetary policy tomorrow?
What's the question?
On the latest inflation rate, agriculture output how are these going to affect the monetary policy tomorrow? Are these going to be
Well,
considered?
when we look at the monetary policy, the primary items we look at are the inflation rate,
Yes.
and what it was, and what the prospects of the inflation, what we estimate the inflation rates are going to be. That's going to drive the decision on the monetary policies going forward.
Yeah.
So obviously, all sectors of the economy are evaluated to see what contribution they will have to or reducing inflation rates. So I don't know. Do you want to
But sir,
add?
we note also that exports contracted for 4 straight months. Manufacturing also fell for 4th month. So what's going to be likely the
Go ahead. Diwa.
Well, export is not a function of monetary policy. Exports would be more of a function of external factors, including the actual demand for our commodities that we export to overseas market. It can also be a function of the exchange rate. But again, the exchange rate is something that we allow to float up or down depending on supply and demand of foreign exchange. So I think it's something that is quite detached from discussions about monetary policy. On monetary policy, just to provide some additional insight to what Secretary Dominguez, it's really under inflation targeting framework. We do look at previous inflation rates, where it is going, because inflation monetary policy works with a long and variable lag. If we do monetary policy today, it will not affect inflation tomorrow or next week. It will affect between 15 to 18 months. So we look at the inflation outlook for the next 12 months and then for the next 24 months. Now, on the basis of the last meeting of the board, I don't want to preempt or even guess what the monetary board is going to do tomorrow. On the basis of the numbers that we saw during the last meeting of the board, it was 3% forecast for 2019 and 2020. We know what happened in 2018. Inflation averaged 5.2%, peaking at 6.7% in September of last year. That's the reason why the national government embarked on those non-monetary measures, and the BSP had to tighten monetary policy by a total of 175 basis points. Now, those combined and helped in the reduction of inflation to 3% in April. So January, April, year to date is 3.6%. So it's something that we work on this when we meet tomorrow. That's just one. We also look at inflation expectations. And if we take a look at the inflation expectations of several groups of analysts and observers, we see that the inflation expectations continue to be elevated at between 3.4 to 3.5%. And thirdly, we look at the health or the strength or weakness of the Philippine economy. And basically, we're seeing that the economy continues to be resilient, despite what happened during the budget impasse in the first quarter of the year. So these are the things that the Monetary Board will be considering tomorrow. What they're going to do, maghintay na lang tayo bukas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
For you, sir, personally, would you consider RR cut only or interest rate cut? Would you
Well,
mind?
I think the issue of the reduction or the cut in the reserve requirement has been a live issue because of two reasons. Why? It is still high at 18%. Therefore, it's a tax on financial intermediation. Second, it's a blunt instrument of monetary policy. Therefore, we need to move away from the use of such a blunt monetary instrument as the reserve requirement, in as much as one, we now have the TDF, the Term Deposit Facility, plus the authority given by Congress to the BSP to issue its own debt securities. But these are agenda for the future, okay? But the reduction in the reserve requirement is something that we need to make sure is consistent with the stance of monetary policy. And second, of course, in terms of the policy rate, the things that I've just said about the considerations before the Monetary Board moves on monetary policy in terms of the policy rate.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, MPC. Thank you, Secretary Dominguez. Thank you, Deputy Governor Guniguindo. Thank you, National Treasurer De Leon and ASEC Lambino. Back to our main studio sa Radyo Pilipinas and People's Television Network.